Hey, what's up, everybody? I want to show you an instructive game today from the FIDE World Rapid 2014 with the white pieces, Grandmaster Alexander Moiseenko, and with the black pieces, Shanglei from China. Moiseenko was 2707 at the time, FIDE, and Shanglei was 2546. So get ready. So D4 from Moiseenko, F5 Dutch defense, and bishop g5. This would be one of the sidelines of the Dutch, but nevertheless is very popular, and it can be very annoying for a Dutch defense player. I played the Dutch for several years, and I still dabble with it every now and then, and this is one of the reasons why I decided to switch to something a little more solid. Um, Not because it was difficult to meet or anything, but I was playing the Leningrad Dutch, and I noticed that I would go for long stretches, long periods of time without actually getting to play a Leningrad setup because of all the anti-Dutch systems that I was constantly facing, whether it would be 2 bishop g5 or knight c3 or e4. So you get the picture. Uh, there's a lot of anti-Dutch systems that are uh, sound that can be played. So just because you don't see c4 and g3, knight f3, bishop g2, and castle, doesn't mean that your opponent is playing a bad line. And this line is pretty dangerous here. So let's see what happened in this game. So bishop g5, there's a lot of punch, a lot of venom contained here. Um, it already presents black with some interesting difficulties. As most of us know, in the Dutch defense, when when black plays f5, um, the benefit of this is he controls e4, right? He's fighting for the control of e4 so that white cannot play e4 himself, and he gets this pawn out in front of the knight. Usually, the pawn will be back here, and the knight will be blocking the pawn. So he's getting, in essence, an extra enforcer on the e4 square. And if he has to, he can even play d5 and knight f6 and just really pile up on that e4 square. The downside of this is that the king side protection is weakened. As you can see, this diagonal is weakened over here from h5 to the king, and also this diagonal here. And many games have been decided based on the weakness of these diagonals. Sometimes the queen goes to b3. There's all type of funny systems like c3 and queen b3, etc. So that is something that black constantly has to look out for. Also, the obvious problem is that black cannot move his e-pawn right now because of the queen would be captured. And now black normally wants to move his knight to f6, as we said, to reinforce the e4 square. But this bishop is here and can just snap it off. Now, you may say, oh, that's no big deal. Black gains the bishop here. Yes, this is true. But practice has shown that these positions that result after knight f6 can get very uncomfortable for black. For instance, white just takes, and then after e takes f6, white just plays a nice, quiet game based on the weaknesses um, resulting around the king side and these double pawns. White usually has a nice pristine pawn structure, and it is very difficult for black to try to use his bishop pair. Usually white will start piling up against this pawn and induce some kind of weakness. And then moves like h4, h5, um, just harassing the king side pawn complex in general in making black's life very difficult. So many masters don't play knight f6 here. They avoid it. So that's already, uh, you know, a problem that has to be handled at move 2. You already have to make an important decision whether to bring your knight out, just a natural move. Now, another defense is h6. Right, an obvious looking defense, just driving the bishop away. There's nothing for the bishop to capture, and black gains a tempi. Now, looking at it a little deeper, we have to ask ourselves, is black really gaining anything? After all, the bishop can go to h4, or the bishop can go to f4, or d2, or c1, and all black has done is weaken its king side even further, because now the g6 square is weak. And if you try to trap the bishop, most people know about this. After g5, white just simply plays e3, because again, this weakness here, if the bishop is captured, then this move would be checkmate. And there's a few blunders that happen in this line. Nevertheless, h6 is one of the main lines, but instead of capturing the bishop after e3, black defends by playing knight f6, and game continues bishop g3. And now, thing about this line, as you can see, is black has gained some space on the king side, but this is double-edged because those pawns can be attacked, and white can use those to open up an attack of his own on the king side against black. Some grandmasters will choose this line. So it's very double-edged. Now, in the game, Shanglei, who's a Dutch player, specializes in the Dutch, chose to move g6, which is great if you're a Leningrad player, as this is a normal move in the Leningrad defense. However, it does waste a little time, and there's sharp play around this, because again, another pawn move in the opening is black. It's not really what you want to be doing, especially pawn moves away from the center, which just further weaken your king side. This is why in this position you see basically everything from knight c3 to e4 to h4 with the idea h5 and cracking open the diagonal here. So you definitely have to do your homework against these main moves again in these main lines after bishop g5. Again, the g6, which was played in the game, h6, and of course knight f6. So depending on your type of play, again, if you don't want to kind of play like a slow, quiet game where white is just slightly better, you might not want to play knight f6. If you want to play a more double-edged game with chances, then you play a move like h6 or g6 for that matter, which was played in the game. But g6 is definitely appealing if you already play the Leningrad system, because some people don't play Leningrad. They might play Stonewall or Classical Dutch and don't want to play g6. Alright, so moving on. So g6 was played, and now knight c3 is played here. Again, e4 is possible, h4. So after knight c3, Shanglei played knight f6. Now he's entering into the line we discussed earlier, where where white has the option of just taking on f6 and damaging the pawn structure. Now, Why would he go into this now? Well, using this particular move order, right, and waiting for white to commit his knight on c3, he can avoid a line. For example, if he played knight f6 on move 2, after bishop takes f6, e takes f6, and let's just say e3, he can avoid lines where white is allowed to play c4. So that might have been part of the thought process, just letting white commit himself a little bit more. Now that this knight is on c3, he decides to play it. Okay, so perhaps he's avoiding those lines. However, this line with knight f6, scores pretty good for white at this point. So I'm not sure why Shanglei would decide to go into this line. h4. This has all been seen before, and very aggressive intentions by white, exploiting the fact that black is a little bit behind in development and has a weakened king side. h6. Again, just further weakening, and to me this helps white here do basically what he wants to do. So now bishop takes f6, e takes f6, damaging the pawn structure. And now we're going to get that position that I was telling you about, where white basically has a nice pawn structure and can just simply attack the pawn weakness of black. h5, knight f4, and now there's no real good way to protect this pawn. Either got to move the rook, or move the king, as in the game. e3, and look how easy white's game is. And now bishop h6 is played, and this overlooks the fantastic move by Moiseenko, a concept rather. So bishop c4 check is played, king g7, because of course black had planned to snap this bishop off, taking the pressure off this, but he doesn't have time. And knight takes g6, king takes g6, and I'm sure that he may have overlooked this. Queen takes h5, and now the queen cannot be captured because of this beautiful mating pattern here with the bishop f4 check, king g4, and then f3 check, king g1, and then king f1, guarding the g2 pawn, and then knight e2 is threatened. So let's make a random move. Knight e2, or of course you can mate with rook h3. So I'm sure Shanglei didn't see the queen sacrifice there. So this is what happens. And again, this is just exploiting the weakness of the black king side here, and lack of development. Basically, just two ideas in this game: is the lack of development and the weakened king side. Black is never able to get his king side together, and he never catches up in development. White just totally demolishes him, opens up the position, and you can see all of the black pieces on the back rank. So instead of taking the queen, of course, he went back to h7, queen f7, bishop g7, knight d5, more pieces coming in. Now rook f8, queen h5, bishop h6, queen takes f5 check, king h8, just not letting black breathe, queen g6, attacking the bishop again, bishop g7, and now queen h5. And the black resign because the king is forced over to the light squares. Okay, and after he's forced to the light squares, there will be a double check after knight takes f6. Okay, so for instance, king g8, knight takes f6, and that would be mate, right? So mate in short order. So this is why he resigned, and of course on bishop h6, you just take the bishop. So that was just a short game, but a good game. And I hope you learned some of the ideas behind this move, bishop g5, which again, it's not the end all be all, right, to the Dutch variation, but it's one of those variations that you definitely. I'll say this about the Dutch defense in general: if you play the Dutch, you have to prepare. It's too sharp not to. You can't wing it. Like you can wing a Kali system or something like that, or Queen's Gambit decline. You might be able to get away with that and not really know how to play it. You can wing a stone wall or something, maybe. But trying to play 1f5 from the black side, you definitely have to know what's going on, or you can, end up in a miniature like this game today. And again, Lu Shanglei is a Dutch defense specialist. So it's not like he's just a GM, but and doesn't really play the Dutch. If you look up his games, you'll see quite a bit of games in the Dutch defense. So he definitely, he's definitely in home territory, and he still was blowing out the water. So just take that, as just some food for thought. Okay. Anyway, please like and subscribe and all that good stuff, and I'll see you on the next video.